What's up, guys? Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have Dave Cooper, aka Dave Cooper Live. If you guys don't know who he is, head over to his website, davecooper.live, or his YouTube channel. But he's an online talk show host, and he's talking everything technology, innovation, and really the premise of what he does is talking about building it better. A heavy focus around offsite construction, which you guys know I'm super passionate about. A heavy focus on panelization, modular construction, and just overall improvement of efficiency when it comes to construction. Now, I've talked about it from the passion perspective, but we're going to dig into some of the metrics as to why it's important. And he even goes on to share some of the companies out there that are making huge strides. Later in the podcast, he even says that there's 500 to 1,000 new companies that are entering the U.S. market when it comes to panelization and offsite construction. So, we talk about the labor shortage, we talk about the cost of construction, we talk about the cost of homes and how we're over budget and behind schedule, and that's a constant thing that we face. We're going to talk about all that and give you some tactical information as to how we can get to a point that we are more efficient. Tyler won't be joining us today. He's actually at the festival headquarters. So he's out there. He's going to be hosting a podcast with, you'll have to wait and find out who that is. But either way, I'm going to dig into it, Dave. So let's get to it. This podcast is brought to you by Andersen Windows. So Andersen launched a contemporary panel option for both the gliding and hinged A-series patio door. This is the best performing, most energy efficient patio door, and it's now available with a thinner bottom rail and contemporary stop and grill profiles. And on the gliding door, an option for flush mount hardware. This is just the latest addition to the selection of contemporary windows as doors. Last year, they also launched the 400 series with the contemporary profile as well, putting a sleek new look on the window that contractors trust most. So visit the link in the podcast description for more product info, to request a quote, or even to design a window. This podcast is brought to you by Buildertrend. Change. Is it a good thing or is it a bad thing? Whatever the answer is for you, change is almost always a hard thing, especially when it comes to introducing new processes or modernizing your construction business. To be clear, we're on team change is good. So are the folks at Buildertrend. This is a construction management for your whole business, a platform to align your team, drive growth, and impress clients. Put down the pen and paper and never worry about fat thumbing another spreadsheet again. Buildertrend's platform gives you the tools to work simpler and run your business without letting it run you. And here's the best news. Remember what we said about change being hard? Nope, not here. Buildertrend's award-winning customer support and training makes it easy to get started. Ready to say goodbye to constant chaos? Check out buildertrend.com/MC, and that's MC as in Modern Craftsman, and make sure you have that /MC at the end. I'm sure it's a special link just for you guys listening to the podcast. What's up, guys? We're back live on YouTube. If you guys aren't tuning into our YouTube live and you're listening on podcast, make sure you tune in every Tuesday afternoon when we do record live and stream the interview live. This week, we got Dave Cooper. I always say your name, Dave Cooper Live, because
what? My kids do the same thing. They introduce me to everybody that way. I don't know if
like,
that's a
this
good
is
thing
Dave Cooper Live.
Yeah, it's fun. My kids do that as well, Nick. So it's don't feel bad.
I don't feel bad. I just think it's funny, and it's I actually said today, I'm like, why do I say that? And I know like your website, davecooper.live, but it's like, but why? And I thought, and in the same train of thought, I had this neighbor growing up, and their names were Phil and Ann, and they live next door to us.
Yeah.
But we would never address them as Phil or Ann. It was always, hi, Phil and Ann. Hi, Phil and Ann. And it would only be Phil out in the backyard. And it was just like ingrained in us that it was always Phil and Ann. And I remember being a kid and he's like, Ann's not here. I'm like, yeah, but that's just your name. Like, it's just what your name is to us.
That's right. It's ingrained. It's like a little duckling, right? When they get ingrained as a young child.
But I guess for you, especially your brand, that's so good because now it's like everyone knows Dave Cooper Live. You type that in Google, it's up.
Yeah, no, we're very, very fortunate in that, and my kids started calling me that from a very young age, just because they always hear me saying it. So even they refer to me as that's Dave Cooper Live. And
Amazing.
the funny part is, just recently we moved back to Pittsburgh. They made all these new friends. All their friends wearing my swag, so we're going out, and they're like, "You got any swag we can wear at yours?" So it's been kind of fun.
Dude, swag is so funny to me. Like people eat up free T-shirts, and it's
Yeah,
like, and I never have, and I always feel so bad because someone's like, "Hey, can I give you my shirt?" I'm like, you know what? If you give it to me, I'm not gonna wear it. I wear
right.
my brand, and I wear my quote unquote regular clothes.
Yeah,
But my guys will wear it. So if you want me to bring it in my office and I'll put it in this box that says free, and people get to take it, they all eat it up.
there you go.
It's
Yeah,
funny.
well,
Um,
it is funny that way. So, well, where do you want to start, man? I got all kinds of good stuff.
Dude, why don't you just before we get into anything specific,
Yeah,
like you gave me your story when we were in Switzerland. We had the pleasure of being on that amazing Siga tour,
yeah, it was great.
and spending a fair amount of hours on a bus touring uh, you know the countryside of Switzerland. But before we get into any of your story or what you're doing now or how you got here, why don't you just give a quick rundown of who you are?
Yeah, for sure. Well, born and raised Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Right out of high school, I was not meant for college. I ended up going into the military, and that also wasn't by much choice. I had a judge telling me to either get on that bus or I'm going on that bus over there.
Mm,
So I clearly made the right choice. I spent 10 years in the military as a combat medic, had multiple tours overseas, and had made some great friends and did some great things. Quickly I got out. I ended up, my first job was with Johnson and Johnson, training neuro and orthopedic spine surgeons and spinal implant techniques. Liked it but didn't love it,
mm,
right? 2001 September 11th hit. I was a rescue worker. I was standing on Vesey Street when the second building came down. Being a combat medic, I felt obligated to stay there until FEMA kicked us out. But as I was there, I kind of started rethinking what I was doing for a living. You really kind of start put things together in a moment like that. And that was it, man. I said, you know what? I'm going back to what I said I'd never do, because I grew up framing houses with my uncle
mm.
in the summertime, right? So never do that. I'll never do that. And lo and behold, I was already invested in some properties. So I started flipping houses and started buying my own land, did my first spec house. A guy next to us did a modular home, right? And this is in New Jersey. I wasn't even done with my sheetrock yet, and he already was handing the keys over to the customer at the same price point I was going to sell my home at.
Yeah.
And here, lo and behold, that's how I ended up in construction, and specifically offsite modular construction and panelization. And
So,
here
so
I am.
and you and I talked about this a little bit, but that's where, I'm super interested in this industry that, I don't know
Yeah.
if you saw the article New York Times put out the other day about um the efficiency in construction. It was really centered around commercial, but as I think everything, it starts in commercial and then trickles down to residential, with technology advancing and everything else. But it talked about how we've become more inefficient at construction, which is like how have we done that? And it talks a lot about the jurisdiction and government agencies, and
Sure.
everyone's hand in the pot, and deciding whether or not a project can move forward, and people that shouldn't be part of it are part of it, blah 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 blah. But the reality is like we also build very archaically, and panelization, modularization, all of that is super interesting. So I want to dig into that. Before
Yeah.
we do, I have two, one kind of funny note and then one more serious one. But Pittsburgh, I know I asked you this on the bus and I can't remember. Do you frequent downtown Pittsburgh?
Yeah. Pretty regularly.
Have you
Not.
been to Condado's Tacos?
I have
Condado,
not. I have not. No.
I
I
think
need to.
it's
You did ask me about that. I
Yes,
remember now.
dude. So my mother's boyfriend is in Pittsburgh. Yeah, he's in Pittsburgh today, and I found out. I'm like, you have to go to this taco place, and he just texted me a picture. He goes, "I'm here. It's amazing." I'm like, I know it's the best tacos I've had anywhere. So if you're in downtown Pittsburgh, it's right near the culture center.
Yeah.
Either way, great taco
Well,
spot.
how about this? How about we do one better than that? I'll be down. We'll schedule when I'll be there having a taco, and then you can bring me into your live stream, and I can give you a review on what I think of your
No,
tacos, and then you can kick me out.
I'll one up you from there. Why don't we meet there and
There
then
you
we can
go.
do a live stream together
I
from
love it.
Condado's Tacos.
Yeah.
On a more serious note, what was it like being in New York at that time? I know it obviously
Mhm.
you alluded to the fact that it was life changing from a career perspective, but what about not specifically from a career perspective?
Yeah. The funny part about it is, and I can share a video that I did years ago. Just the news interviewed me, but I was actually in Jersey City when the planes got hit on the other side of the Hudson River.
Hmm.
I was in a very safe position watching it, just like everybody else watched, on TV. But I was right there in the river. And as they started evacuating the city and things, and this will lead into your answer to your question.
Hmm.
Um, when they were evacuating the city, a fireboat came over. Their medic had a broken arm, falling debris. People were jumping out of the building. There was all kinds of just really bad stuff happening at the time. I was down there. I had my aid bag because I still had it from being a medic in the service and from doing my implants with J&J. Long story short, the captain looked at me. He goes, "You a doctor?" I said, "No, but I'm a combat medic." He goes, "Good. Can you come with me? We need your help." And I climbed over the railing onto this boat, and if you have ever crossed the Hudson River, which I'm sure you probably have before, it's not a short ride,
Yeah.
even on a fireboat, and that's when I sat there, and it was very surreal for that very moment.
Mm.
Um, on the Jersey City side, everybody was, just kind of shocked, in tears, a lot of crying, everybody just kind of watching and trying to help out,
Yeah.
like with the people coming off the boats. When we got over to the other side, we were in Lower Manhattan, where they cut the fence for us to get up over Battery Park, I guess it was, right down in that area. It was just a whole nother story. There was a lot of panic, a lot of crying, a lot of debris everywhere. Like papers, not
Hmm.
the stacked towers there. But as we moved our way up towards the towers, it became more somber. I mean, I don't know what hell's like, but it's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah.
I mean, I've done my tours and had all of that, but I mean, this was just different, right? I mean, this wasn't, one buddy. This is thousands of people that got really, really hurt. And I have to tell you, when you get up to the buildings and everybody's seeing on TV what's going on, it's just your mind goes to a different place when you actually people make a decision to jump versus burn to
Yeah.
death. And
Yeah.
that's so to answer your question, I think it was just a lot of shock. I think a lot of people have PTSD, even if you weren't there. I think it brings back horrible memories.
Hmm.
Um, and I just have to say I was very privileged to have the honor to actually put skills I learned, as a combat medic
Yeah.
in, to what I do there. And I did help a lot of people. But obviously not a lot of survivors.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like as you talk about crossing the river, I actually sit here and get goosebumps about it. But when you put that into perspective, where it's like you're sitting across the river, and it's like this body of water has created this like safety net,
Yeah.
where all you can do is watch and be an onlooker, and hope that everything ends up somewhat okay. And then the moment you step on that boat and you are progressively getting closer, you know, I can't speak to what that feels like, but I feel like I can put myself in a position where your mind goes from, hoping and wishing to nothing. Like there's only one thing on my mind, and it's to get to where I can be the most helpful as quickly as possible. And you get into this like tactical mindset.
Yeah. Once you're committed, you're committed. But I honestly, Nick, when I was about halfway through, I kind of looked up and like, what the hell did I just do?
Yeah.
Like you have a moment where you second guess yourself,
Sure.
and it's scary. You didn't know what was going to happen because there's fire everywhere with the buildings coming down. There's broken. Think of all the gas lines that are shut off.
Yeah.
So there's all these unknown things that are happening, and all you can hear is all the firemen sirens beeping and blowing. And but like you said, once you climb over that where they cut open the railing there, it's just you just do what you do. You just go with it and you try and just help where you can.
What an interesting thing to mention is like the gas lines. You think like when that, and I'm just thinking of like all the people that are involved, and it's at some point someone was like, "Hey, we need to shut the gas off to that building,"
Yeah.
and to make that decision, and like how critical that is to potentially thousands of people. And it's like, and then you're making it, uh, it. I don't know. I feel like I could talk about this forever. I don't want to because it's it's not the purpose of the podcast. But kudos to you for being there, and like you said, having the ability to be part of helping. That's That's pretty amazing. So
Yeah, if you like, I got a couple pictures I show you real quick of me being there if you're interested, since we're on it, or we can move on, whatever you want.
yeah, I mean, the people listening won't be able to see it,
Ah,
but
this is true.
but
This is true.
well, why don't you share them after?
Afterwards?
Yeah, let's
Got it.
share them after.
Perfect. Let's keep going.
Cool. All right. So before we like, I want to dig into all the panelization, the modular. Why, why did you step away? Like, you obviously alluded to the fact that your neighbor is building this house, gets it done in X amount of time faster, but you went from building and being hands on to
Mhm.
essentially now you're hosting this online talk show, which is the DaveCooper.live. What was that like? Why shift from being hands on to being a talk show host?
Yeah. So as we grew our business, we eventually merged with a company out of Connecticut, and had a partnership, and we grew to 3 locations between Connecticut and Rhode Island, and had 3 design centers. And with that, we were building anywhere between 30 and 60 homes a year for quite some time.
At what price point?
Anywhere from $350,000 up to $6 million, depending. We did a
Sure.
lot of builds in Greenwich, Connecticut, or even smaller homes like Block Island, Fisher's Island, where they're not big houses, but it's still the cost of building on an island.
And those were paneled?
These
Paneled, is
were
it
these were
modular?
yeah, 75% of them modular or a hybrid approach of modular and panel.
So can you define the difference between those two?
Yeah, so a modular home really is it comes down the highway in the back of a truck. It's 6 sides, right? The
Mhm.
sheetrock's in, the wiring's in, the flooring can be in, the kitchens can be in, and it's built to the same codes as any traditional site built home. We just put it together a little bit differently. That's all there is to it. We took a house, we cut it up in pieces, we built it in sections, and we put it together in sections like a big Lego block.
Mhm.
Panelized parts and pieces are exactly that. It'd be like a wall structure,
Mhm.
sometimes closed, sometimes mostly open, where it's just the framing of the house.
Mhm.
So I'll give you an idea. Like in New York, in that area, we cannot ship higher than 9'2" ceilings on the back of a truck. But by the time it's up on the back of the flatbed, you can't get under the old bridges in a lot of places.
Mhm.
So you're limited. So when I say the hybrid approach, we would do as much as we could modular, and then we would use panelized on location to still speed up that process and get those 10-foot ceilings, 11-foot ceilings, or big gantry rooms or what have you. So the difference is panelization are the kit parts. It's the walls, the
Mhm.
floor, maybe trusses are, kind of what we would consider a panel. And modular is a fully volumetric box.
So when you think of modular, what are the things that you compromise on? If you're building a modular home, like what are the things like, oh, if you are doing modular, you're going to lose out on, these particular, features.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing you can lose on if you go strictly modular, depending on the area you live, in the Northeast, it's going to be height of ceilings,
Mhm.
right? You're going to go to a 9'2" ceiling,
Mhm.
period. That's the biggest thing you lose. As far as big open spaces, customization, high end cabinets, lighting, recess, LEDs, all of that is exactly the same. But the biggest thing you lose is going to be the height. You can go as big as you want. I mean, we've done homes, 11,000 square foot modular.
Mhm.
And you can also still get the big vaulted ceilings without panelizing as well. Just because you're modular doesn't mean you can't have open big spaces. It's
Right.
just hollow all the way up. Um, but that's usually the biggest thing. And you have more columns in the basement, lolly columns, things of
Yeah.
that nature.
I was going to say, from an engineering perspective, you must be increasing the amount of like point load, because you can only you're not going to be spanning more than what, 8'6" wide or 9 foot.
16.
You can go 16 wide.
Yeah, it's 15.9, but we'll call it
Got it.
16 for this purpose. But yeah,
Right. Where like, if we were stick building, we could get I-joist spanning wider than that.
correct. You could definitely, but in those cases as well, if we're going with a 9-foot ceiling, for instance,
Mhm.
10-foot ceiling, we put an I beam in the basement along those mate walls, so you can have less columns and the beam carries the
Sure.
weight. No different than a site built home.
Got it. So when you think about like plumbing and electrical, I heard this story years ago. I was in probably middle school. A friend of ours got a modular home, very simple, like, colonial box with a 2-car garage, like
Yeah,
quintessential, and it was like the talk of the town. Like, hey, they're building a modular home. And I remember that they stood it up in a day. It was like box, box, box. And there was
right.
stories like, yeah, all they did is take this RV connection and every time the box came together, they just spun this connection in the wall for electrical, like an RV, and the whole house had power. Is
Isn't
that
it cool?
how it is?
Not everything. Not all of the modular manufacturers use those quick connects that you're talking about, where you
Mm,
snap each section together from a wiring perspective. But that's what you're going to see moving forward. They do
yeah.
it in cars, they do it in airplanes, they do it everywhere else, but we don't do it in home building. It makes no sense.
Why don't we?
Why change? So I have several theories on this, right? And
Okay.
I might upset some of the site builders out there and stick builders, but when the market was good and the labor was good, why change? Everybody's making profit margin. Why screw with it? That's basically as simple as it gets. Same with the big production builders. Why switch why switch if it's working and you can get your 40, 50,000 homes a year built? But why it's changing now is because of that labor issues. Kids don't want to play, they don't want to play outside walking still plates in the cold winter anymore.
Mhm.
They can make money playing Fortnite.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want to make money playing Fortnite? So that's kind of the main reason in my mind why it's changing. And our industry is not meeting the youth where they're at, right? We're not. We're archaic compared. I mean, agriculture is more advanced than home building.
Yeah.
Agriculture.
I know.
So
Well, you see
that's
the
what's scary.
technology in those machines that they use.
Right. Absolutely. But that's what's really cool too, because guess what? There's only one way to go, and
Mhm.
that's up.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what we're really excited about and what we focus on a lot of conversation about.
And when you talk about Fortnite, for example, like, and they get paid to play that, the reality is like with technology advancing and making these panelization, like most of what we're talking about is computers
Yeah.
and like building this into a computer model, 3D BIM modeling, and and then a robot essentially in a factory that is
Right.
doing the monotonous work. You're still going to have humans, I think, I, I would say indefinitely, but certainly for the rest of my lifetime and probably my kids' lifetime when it comes to building homes. But
Yeah.
the reality is like there's a lot of things that we can replace the human hand with CNCs, and we see that in millwork. Everyone's using a CNC to cut their cabinet boxes now,
Right.
if not more than that. And then they have the guys just putting everything together. So it's when
Yeah.
you think about what you just said about we're not meeting the youth where they're at, it's like, well, we that side of the industry is the industry that is technologically advanced and spending the time in the 3D and CNC world and BIM modeling, because that's what the kids know.
Yeah. So as that becomes more prevalent or better adopted in our industry and more affordable for the custom builders, the single home, builders. I mean, think about it. We've been building 100-story skyscrapers forever,
Hmm.
right? Their foundations aren't quarter inch out of square. They're not. Think about how big these buildings are, and we can't even get a house right. You
Yeah.
know, it's mind boggling in that sense. But you're absolutely right. Now that we're starting to see BIM, we're starting to see the digital twin, and for those that
Yeah.
don't know what that is, it's building it twice, build it on paper and then build it in the field,
Mhm.
build it on the computer, I should say. And you're right. A lot of the youth is coming back into this industry for it, and robotics are not going to take over the industry. They're going to help the industry,
Right.
and they're going to make our industry a much more diverse place to work, because with robots or exoskeleton suits, now you don't have to be a 270-pound guy to carry 12 2x4s up a ladder. A woman could do it, a smaller man could do it, whatever.
Hmm.
You're not judged by your size and strength anymore. It opens it up in a factory and in the field.
The exoskeleton thing is interesting because you look at it now and you see what they look like, and people are like, "That's stupid. I'd never wear it."
Yeah,
And but the reality is, it's like this is just the introduction of it.
that's right.
This isn't something that you're not going to walk on a job site and everyone's going to be wearing a Hilti exoskeleton or whatever, whoever makes them now. But like, not everyone's going to be walking around with these things strapped to them. But the reality is that, okay, if these work now, how do we do it in a way that eventually it's going to be a T-shirt you wear. You're going to slide a
That's right.
T-shirt on, and it's going to have this like thing inside of it that helps you lift heavier weights, which is
Yeah,
just
no,
going to, but it's
yeah.
the introduction of the technology.
Well, just like a pilot, think about how they wear those suits when they're doing G-force turns, right? There's technology that helps keep your blood where it needs to be, so you don't,
Mm,
pass out and kill a million people on the ground.
yeah.
So I think it's coming, and I think technology is growing really, really fast right now. And we're an industry that everybody's looking at because we need so much help. The
Mhm.
affordability crisis, the homeless crisis. I mean, it's just not attainable for the average person anymore. And there's so many people sleeping on the streets, especially if you go out west. It's really hard to see. And I think the way we've been doing it is not working.
Yeah. The what you said about building like 100-story skyscrapers and we can't even get residential homes correct. One of the conversations I've been having a lot recently is people, the consumer, right? They're building these massive homes,
Yeah.
and the biggest thing that they are focused on is how big or how much can I get into this home. And it's always about like for how like and then how do I do it for like less expensive as I can. So
Right.
it's like we're custom building a one of one prototype home at the top of their most of these people's financial capabilities, because they're trying to get all of this stuff into it, and they're trying to do it for a lesser cost than it really should cost. And then we're over budget, and then there's frustration, and then these homes become so expensive, and the next thing you know, these homes are just like completely unobtainable by
Right.
clients, or builders aren't making any money, when it's like we've perpetuated this. We continue to build these big homes for no margin. So what happens is, okay, well, this guy just builds a $1 million home, and then they ask me to price it, and I'm 2.5 million. It's like, well, he was a million, I'll just hire him. Well, that guy's not making money, and he's also
Right.
making decisions that are impacting the quality of the home. So I'll never have we'll never get to a point in the industry where where that $1 million home, which should cost 2.5, will ever be built, or won't be, built on a regular basis, because there's always going to be someone else that's doing it for a lesser quality, and for no profit,
Right.
and which disrupts the whole industry. And then all of a sudden, next thing you know, all these homes get more and more expensive, bigger and bigger, and then the spread between me and the guy that you know isn't doing it correctly becomes bigger. And then for me, it's like the only thing that we keep making them bigger, we keep making them more expensive, but the guy's still not making money, and they're still making decisions that are poor quality, or and ultimately a poor product. I think I brought this up before, but I look at where I live in the city of in Boston, and I've talked about this before, but they're building these multifamily buildings all over the place. Everyone's a developer. The money's great. They're whipping these things up, and I watch them go up. And I say to my wife, every time we drive by, I'm like, 6 months from now, there'll be a boom lift parked in front of that building.
Yep.
And she's like, why? I'm like, because the facade's going to fail. And every single building, eventually a boom lift ends up out front. And we drove by one the other day. I'm like, efflorescence pouring down all brand new brick. I'm like, it's that building's leaking. There's moisture coming out of the walls. And next thing you know, they have the facade ripped off. They're like, oh, we're chasing leaks. It's like,
Yeah.
because it wasn't built correctly. Because you decided to build a huge building for tiny dollars because you could take advantage of the real estate market. And that's the frustrating thing, I think, for like us as an industry, and the guys out there, like, I want to do a good job, but I keep getting undercut, or it's like that guy's doing it at 8% cost plus and I'm trying to be at 15. It's like, no,
Yeah.
he's not making any money.
You know, a lot of this comes back to, society and education. And, when we were in Switzerland, the trades were treated with such respect. They made a great income, but the difference was that the civilian population, or the other people, regardless of what their job, they knew what kind of work and training the carpenter, the plumber, the electrician had to go through. Unlike here, where we can just go pay 135 bucks and I'm a general contractor.
Yeah.
And I think, this is where, and no business classes.
Hmm.
That's the other side of this. No business classes, right? So we're expecting tradespeople with, some with very little education, in the trades, as well as any business education, and they're undercutting. But like you said, I don't think a lot of times it's meant to be. I just think people don't know any different. They don't really understand the cost of running a business, and they don't understand the cost of employees and markup and material to truly make a living, to where Nick, you or I could put our kids through school, right?
Right.
And that's hard.
I would say like that is the biggest takeaway from Switzerland is I felt like everyone respected everyone.
Yeah, they did.
Early in the morning I wake up. I remember, I'd be up 5, 6 in the morning and, I'd go out for a run or whatever. And, this guy's sweeping the street. Everyone's super friendly. The city was super clean. Like everyone had a job and everyone's job was respected.
Yes.
And it was and obviously when we visited the carpentry school, you know, it was evident like those guys, they cared. They were there to learn. They wanted to perfect this. They wanted to go into this trade. That was the number one comment I got though is like, oh, well, of course, these guys are, going to this school because they're actually paid, way more than they are here in the US. And
Hmm.
then I happened to interview Mike Rowe when I was out there and it was like, we talked about the same thing. It's like, yeah, these guys aren't paid right. They're not paid correctly.
Yeah.
And a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're also not training them. We're just hiring people and then like, hey, you're just gonna be yeah, you'll be a journeyman. It's like, well, how are we defining that? It's like, well, you've been doing it for 5 years, right? That sounds good.
Yeah. Well, and you see, this is the thing, right? The general public, you can't blame them either because so many unskilled, untrained laborers have taken them to the bank.
Yeah.
And that's the other side of this. So that's why I think a lot of them think, well, hey, I'm going to get screwed anyhow. I might as well just go with the lowest bid and, I have some money to pay my way out of it.
Right.
I think people truly think that way. But yeah, it comes down to education, and I think it comes down to the people respecting the builders. And you're a very respected builder, but you build a reputation, you get referrals, you get all those things. So there is a point where it changes, but man, it can make it really hard for the person that's really a good carpenter and business person starting out to try and really get somewhere and make a living without feeling deflated.
Yeah, and I think like, what you just said, it's like, yeah, it takes time. You got to build reputation. But that's with anything.
Yeah.
And I think that if that was truly, weighted in a consumer's eyes of like building the reputation rather than like, hey, I'll just take advantage of the cheap guy.
Yeah.
If it was truly based on the reputation, a lot less people will go into business. And we
Yeah.
talk about it all the time, like the barrier to entry for this business is nothing. It's like you don't need a degree. You barely need a license, if at all in some parts of the country. It's like you just, you might be a guy with a pickup truck. We talked about I had lunch with another builder today and we were talking about it. It's like sometimes, these guys that are out there competing, quote unquote competing against us, it's like, yeah, they're one guy or they're a two-man shop. So
Right.
their general conditions is going to be way less than us. We're white glove. When you work with us, you have a PM, you have a site super, we have a director of operations, you got
Yeah.
a construction admin. Like it's a white glove service. You are getting handheld through the entire process. And that's the clientele we want to work with. Where it's like, well, we talked to him and he was a million less. It's like, of course he was a million less. he's got to wake up, hop in his truck, and he goes to your job and maybe three other ones, checks in to make sure it's going well. And there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
that. Like that's the reality.
Right.
Like but you still need the good reputation. You still need to be able to produce a good product.
Right.
And we need to, like you said, educate the consumer that this isn't don't take advantage of the lowest cost because it never works out.
Right. Well, and that's it. And just because he was a million less doesn't mean it's not going to cost you 365 days more to get it done either.
Right.
Right.
Very true.
There's time and money and interest and
Yeah.
headaches, and typically by the end of a build, the customers, they like you, hopefully, but they still ready just to get back to their life.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
So, going back to panelization, like,
Yep.
or in modular and just offsite construction, let's just call it offsite construction.
Right.
This is a huge interest of mine. I think that, things are just taking so long to build and, I put a lot of pressure on my team and, I certainly get enough pushback from all of them. And, we had this Encore casino built outside of the city and I forget what the time frame was on it, but it was something like ridiculous. Like it was like
Yeah.
18 or like 24 months that they built this thing. And, I mean, they were working 2, maybe 3 shifts, I forget. And I always reference it and they're like, Nick, they had hundreds of millions of dollars to get this done. But I would challenge them like, so if you had unlimited money, would you be able to get this done faster? Like, is that the limiting factor?
Right.
And it's usually, well, no, like we can't fit that many people in the house. It's like, to do what? Well, to install the casing on the doors. It's like, could we be proactive and order all that casing like pre-made in a millwork shop? Well, yeah, but then we'd have to, kind of plan through that. It's like, so if we planned more, or if we built a model, the digital twin, BIM modeling, like, we could technically order all this stuff, right? And I always, and a lot of this comes from my background. I spent 4 years in commercial, and we
Mhm.
did a 32-story high rise. And, when they were ready to wire the unit, it was apartment unit, there would be a 24 by 24 cardboard box that would get dropped at the front door, and when they opened it up, and it was a wiring harness for the whole unit.
Yeah.
And it was quick. They went around, put all the boxes, clipped the wires, pulled it back to the panel, and they were done. And it's like, we could do that in residential. All the duct work, every piece of duct work was cut and fabricated in a shop and delivered to the job, and it just stacked all the way up because it was fully coordinated.
Mhm.
It's like, steel doesn't get cut, on site. If it does, like, someone screwed up.
Right.
you
Yeah.
know and it's, we do it with windows, right? You order windows at this point 7, 8, 9 months in advance, but those windows are built to your spec, and they show up from, say Andersen Windows, and they go into the opening that you framed, and hopefully you framed all those openings right. But we could be doing that with everything, and this is where it goes to the offsite construction side, where it's like, we're still building things by hand every step of the way on site.
Yeah. So in my world, Nick, where I've been living, doing this show and still building and doing some projects, is I don't believe in a dumpster on site. Why am I throwing
Love that.
30% of the customers' lumber and materials in there? And number two is I don't believe in change orders. Like, who
Yeah.
has the change orders? I'll give you an example. Like, masons and I have a fight quite often, master masons, right? Because we're building within, a tolerance of 1 to 2 millimeters on some of our stuff, especially if we're using CLT like you saw in Switzerland, right?
Yep.
Where it is so tight, you could do 0 millimeter tolerance. It's that tight. No different than steel, and you got a mason says, well, we got, the code book says we're allowed so much out of whack per 100 feet or whatever the case is. And well, that really screws us up when you're working with, 0 millimeter, 1 millimeter tolerances. And we don't go for it. And I'm going to give you the exact reason why, and your audience will get this, right? Who do you think is the best offsite builder in the world, in the universe?
And
NASA.
yeah. Well,
Think about it.
yeah. I know where you're going. I'm gonna let you finish. Go ahead.
Yeah, so NASA, right? So here we are. They got the whole space station up in space. They're taking on this new, 40 by 80, package that they're going to clip on. It's going to be airtight. They put on all their gear. They put on their helmet. They get out. They're spacewalking now. Their life's in jeopardy. They pull out their plans and it says field verify, right? How dumb is that? That's just everybody passing the buck.
Yeah.
So yeah, sorry for my soapbox there,
No,
but
but
in
so,
our world, we believe in this.
and Dave, like, so we interviewed for 2 remote island projects.
Yeah.
And one of them was, you got there by a 6-person water taxi.
Yeah.
So we were chatting, and the architect and I are chatting about it, and we're talking about, like, the logistics and how difficult it would be, and the client's asking us, like, well, how are you going to do this in an efficient way? Like, what if you forget something? And we both said, like, no, this is like going to the space station. You don't get there and be like, oh, I forgot the 10 millimeter wrench.
That's right.
It's like, no, you package this stuff up and you check it like 10 times. You put it in the container, that stuff shows up, and when you get on site, everything's
Yeah.
there. And again, it's like, in residential, we just don't do it. We don't,
No.
like, and I've said this on a podcast, and I actually got a few emails last time I said it, but it's like, we're not modeling these things. We're not thinking this all the way through. We are literally, like, design building to the end of the project.
Yeah.
And it's like, we're not considering these things, and it creates an enormous amount of expense that at this point is so hard to quantify, because it's just typical.
Right.
Hey, this is just how construction is. So what used to be $600 a square foot is now $800. It's like, well, why? It's like, well, because I know we're not going to have a 100% CD until we get the as-builts. And we're going to design stuff and figure stuff out. And, and then all of a sudden, we didn't account for the fact that flange on the steel's wider. So now we have this weird soffit. So we got to work around that. And that looks like shit. So now we got to figure out how to make it look better. Or like, we don't have anywhere to put the plumbing. It's like, if we just took the time to think this through all the way to completion, we would have the ability. Now, there's two things here. It's like, you could do that and you could still approach this in a very traditional stick built, everything gets fabricated on site, put together, piece by piece. Or you could say, hold on, we have all the information. Let's go outsource this to a factory to build the CLT panels, to a plumbing factory to build all of the plumbing valves for all the showers. Do it all in a factory. Get the electrician to figure out like what he needs, so he's not figuring that out, on site. All the duct work, like where's all the duct work going? It's like, hey, we got a chase right here. Great, I'm going to have all that stuff fabricated. We'd use higher quality materials because we'd have the ability to know. Like, I think I directly think about duct work, where oftentimes like people are slamming flex duct into spaces that it doesn't actually fit because, well, sheet metal is certainly not going to fit, and it's going to be costly because it's going to have to be custom made. So they're shoving flex duct everywhere. Next thing you know, it's crushed. Next thing you know, it doesn't heat well. Next thing you know, it's like, well, it actually is ripped open and half your heat's ending up in your ceiling. And it's like, we have, by thinking it through, I'm advocating for this rather than asking you. But it's like, this is really where I'm at. And, my final point, and I'll shut up for a minute, but like, not my final point.
It's your podcast, man. You can keep going. I'll listen all day. You're selling it.
I could just sit here and talk, right? And Tyler's not joining us today. But so this is where I'm going with our company, and where, we're working with framers, and, shout out to the guys at ShevCon who framed our Needham project. They did a fantastic job, but it's like, I still sit there and like, we could have been so much more efficient if we thought this thing through and built it in a shop. And I want to be very clear, that doesn't take the job away from the framer. That relocates where they're executing their work in a more controlled environment, utilizing things like CNC and computers to figure out how to reduce waste. I think of Mike Riley from Cape Cod Panel. Mm-hmm. I toured his shop, and he orders all his sheet goods in certain lengths because when he frames a house, he's got a 55-gallon trash barrel of scrap, and that's it. Because what it does is it says, all right, you got all 21-foot 2x4s. Yep. I'm going to cut these studs out of it in this order because that will yield the least amount of waste. We could never do that as humans.
No. We would probably reheats his shop with the wasted wood.
I think he does. Yeah.
Yep.
But it's like, we can't, we would spend so much time trying to figure out the yield and like cutting, a cripple here and a king stud here and, a jack over here out of this, where it's like, no, you're cutting the pieces that you need in that very moment. You're not thinking about, all the pieces that you need for the whole project. You're only thinking about that right in front of you.
I got a whole lot to comment on. You tell me when I can go.
Go ahead.
So, one, I want to touch on the labor thing, because that is a big thing. We just came back from the International Builders Show, and I did a whole moderating panel on, stick framers versus site build framers. And the one question I did ask is who in the audience is afraid they're going to lose their job with automation and panelization and modular volumetric building, and there were several hands that went up. But you made a really good point, right? With the lack of labor, they struggle with labor too. Right? They struggle with growth. These systems enable them to build more with more efficiency on several jobs, knowing what's happening. Also, it reduces their liability because now they don't have to have as many workers on as many different jobs, hoping they're tying in and strapping in and following OSHA. So the life cycle, the value of this is huge. And mm-hmm. the fact that they can do so many more jobs and get paid with less liability is great for one thing. And two, when we talk about systems, this is where, a lot of people will say, well, I tried panelized and it sucked. I didn't have a good experience. It didn't go together. They had the clown hammer and they're beating the daylights out of it. And then the Sawzall comes out and all right. So that's not a system. A wall panel is a component.
Mhm.
A truss is a component to me.
Yep.
Right. I was on stage with Ben Bogey out there. It was fun
Oh,
in a
yeah.
construction zone. And we did a mass timber demonstration together and a panel system together. And when you look at a floor, you have your floor joist, you have your rim joist, right? And then you have your hangers, right? So that's a system, they would say, right? A floor joist, when you put it all together, you made a system, you made a floor. Great. In my world, a paneled wall is a part of the system. It's a component. You need to be doing floor, walls, stairs, and roof from one manufacturer. You
Mhm.
cannot expect a stick framer to get everything right, right? And then you're going to bring in these perfectly square and straight pieces of material and set it and expect it to be exactly what you want it to be without messing around. That's how you get away with no dumpster. And also with that, you got to look, like you said, the efficiency. Have you ever sat on your job site from start to finish and timed how often your framer turns a piece of wood to see which way the crown's going? Add that up over the course of a year. Think about just that one thing. Add it up.
Mhm.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And this is where, everybody goes, wow, it's so much more expensive, but it's really not. You just can't compare apples to apples. You got to look at the life cycle and what it does, not only for your liability, what it does for your workman comp and what it does for your profitability at the end, because you know what? You're done with that customer maybe 6 months earlier, if not more,
Yeah.
and you're on to the next job doing another one. So those are some of the things I wanted to point out in that conversation.
And you know what the challenge there, and I hear a lot, it's like, okay, the life cycle of it, you're getting the job done faster as a builder, like that's great. But to the end user, they're like, I don't care. It's more expensive. Let's do something, let's stick build it. And
Yep.
like and this is the issue of, having the consumer be in the driver's seat, where, I think oftentimes I see it constantly where it's like there's sometimes that we're allowing the consumer to make the decision, where it's like, no, you hired us to execute this. And I have a great story on that. We were doing a renovation years ago, and they had spec these recessed lights. They were old work. It was an old condo with light gauge metal framing. Way easier to put them in at the end, rather than trying to locate them and modify light gauge framing, because they're just designed to be drill a hole saw, put them up, you're done. And
Mhm.
we had the client come over one day, and he's like, I think you should put the lights in now. And I'm like, nope. I'm like, he's like, well, I think you're doing this wrong. I'm like, with all due respect, you hired us for the end result, not the process. So if I want to paint this whole place red before I paint it white, that's it's my process. You hired us to get it done. At the end of the day, like, you're asking for a particular result. Like, I wouldn't tell like GMC, like, hey, I want a white truck, and be like, but don't prime it first. Just paint it white. I don't want
Yeah.
primer underneath.
Right.
It's like, no, this is how we do it. This is how we get you the end result. Um, and I think that oftentimes we're, allowing these decisions to be made by the consumer. And it's like, hey, well, we could panelize it, which will be $1 million for the shell, but if we stick build it, you'll be, about 800. It's like, well, of
Yeah.
course, when you frame it like that, they're gonna be like, yeah, go the 800 route. But if I said, hey, I could panelize it for $1 million, we'll get the job done 6 months faster. Your heating equipment, I can save you 50% on. That includes a higher performing window, and your energy cost might be close to zero. Or we can save $200,000 and spend 50% more on your heating, and it's
Right.
probably actually going to cost more money to build. You won't get in here for another 6 months, and your heating load, oh, that's going to suck.
Right.
But we don't
You
ever
know,
give them the full picture.
well, and that's it. And it's not always more expensive. It's a matter of people don't know how to really price compare the end result of what the
Mm,
total number ends up being. It's just what they come up with up front. Because a lot of times, even with modular, the electrician and plumber price it at the same price because they don't know any better
mhm.
versus connection points and tying into the street and sewer and all that. But yeah, I agree with you, and changing that, changing the power struggle between the client and the builder. I
Mhm.
mean, that's forever and a day, right? Because as soon
Yeah.
as they hire you, like there's that owner. Oh well, he works for me now,
Right.
And if you're, structural engineer, they're the worst. They were always the worst for us. They'd slide me a check, and all right, well, we want to get started. I would always slide the check back and say, "Are you sure you want to do this with me?" And let them go, "What?" Well, because I make the decisions on this, and we've done this, 1,600 times now. Like sometimes you have to have those conversations. We used to do it in our design centers regularly, especially when you had that constant change. They couldn't finalize anything.
Mhm.
And in my world, you don't go to production until you finalize stuff.
Yeah.
So
Who are the
that's great.
biggest players in the US right now when it comes to, whether it's panelization or modular? Like, who are you paying attention to?
You know what? This may surprise everybody, but there is probably 500 to 1,000 new manufacturers coming online across the US right now. Everybody from Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates own factories now. Walmart
Is
is
that
doing,
good? Is that good for us?
so I say that in the sense that everybody's paying attention to it. It's not if it's going to go to a lot of offsite and building
Mhm.
systems. It's going now.
Yeah.
That's just the bottom line. Stick building will always be there,
Yeah.
but it's going to be a much bigger player in our role. So when we look at what's happening from a playing perspective, Google, they're all doing it.
Mhm.
I think it's good for the industry for building systems. I think it's really good for the industry to drive costs down because the more manufacturing you have, just like automobile manufacturers, and the more options consumer has, and then they actually put marketing behind it so the consumer is educated,
Mhm.
like the pharmaceutical companies have done, right? They stopped taking doctors on vacations, right? They're not allowed to do that anymore. They're bad against the law. So what did they do? They turned to the consumer and said, "You want my purple pill,
Mhm.
right? Ask your doctor for my pill." That's the same thing we really need to start happening is getting the consumer to demand a better product.
Mm.
The one thing we have with, systems building versus site building is more control of the atmosphere, the environment, and the lumber. We're
Mhm.
not we're not sheetrocking a week after it rained and it hasn't dried out because humidity's been 100%.
Mhm.
There's all these little things, and you're a high performance builder as well, and you get that. All of our lumber's dry kilned. But when you ask me about the biggest players in the industry and what's happening, you got volumetric building companies, VBC, right? They just bought the old Katerra plant out in California. They're in Poland. They're in the Carolinas. They're in PA. They're making really big strides. But what we're seeing a lot of now is like companies like AutoVol that are 400,000 square feet, fully robotic house building manufacturers, fully robotic, like
And
lines and lines of
and
robots.
and just for the sake of like understanding that those are normal, like I'm using air quotes, normal homes, like box homes, right? They're not custom like luxury homes. They're like the vast majority of what people live in.
Yeah. So those are not going to be your high end custom homes, right?
Mm.
It's going to be right now it's a repetitive process.
Yeah.
But what's happening, right, is they get these robots tuned in and dialed in because it's new still.
Mhm.
It's still new. And AI, artificial intelligence, starts playing a role.
Mhm.
Now all of a sudden, your plans and the AI feeds the robot, and that robot can build whatever you want it to build as it goes down the line without it having to mess with productivity and line moves because now it's automated in a system. And all the technology to do all of this exists. It's just our home building industry is just figuring out how to use it in our industry.
It's funny you mentioned AI. A friend of mine is really interested and to the point where he's investing a lot into construction software, talking
Yeah.
about the digital twin, where talking about all of the things, everything that's related to software and AI and how it relates to construction. And one of the things he shared with me the other day was Hierarch.
Mhm.
And it's a software that essentially you can populate an entire home CD set, in a
Yep.
matter of minutes, and it's that you're like dragging and pulling and like you're there's obviously limitations to it, but again, the vast majority of what people live in, like, here's an opportunity where you can go in and build your own home in a matter of minutes, and then it automatically generates a construction set of drawings that a builder can take and build, because when you think about it, that's all it is you're pulling
Right.
and pushing and extruding and doing that. And when you add certain elements or systems to that build, it's going to require certain things, and all that is an output from what you're asking it to do, which is super interesting. And to be able to relate that to this robotic facility where it's like, all right, well, if you can do it in a plan, why wouldn't a robot be able to be like, yeah, I understand that, I can, let me pull a piece of plywood off this pile of plywood because I know this is plywood, and let me pull off some 2x over here, and,
Yeah.
and I'll throw them on my saw that automatically cuts it to length, and I can pick that up and put it over in this rack that's gonna fasten it together.
Oh, it's amazing. Hey, think of the Apple building. Everybody knows the big round new building they built.
Mm,
Most people don't know that was all panels. That was
interesting.
all built off site and assembled on site.
Yeah.
So Apple's doing it. And I'll tell you another, we just had a guest on the show last week, Agaris. This is somebody you should interview. All Navy SEALs.
Mm.
and they're in San Diego. They're using robots in one line. And what you're talking about as far as custom home building goes, that is where they are headed with the way they are doing their systems. So, like I said, it's not if, it's when, or when, it's if, or whatever the case is, it's happening. And the code's being cracked. And like your friend taught, looking at the AI and how the software works. I mean, that's already being looked at real heavily in our space.
Hmm.
We have it now. This is pretty cool. And I'll give you some other things. Look at Archistar out of Australia. So imagine this, Nick. You're a custom home builder. You say, "Hey, man, I want to build a house in New Jersey in this area because that's where I want to move." You go online, you can find the lot. All right, now you found the lot, and all of a sudden you say, "Well, on that lot, right? I want to build, 5,000 square feet, 4 bedroom, 3.5 bath home, 3 car garage. Dot dot dot." Hit the button. It'll
Dude,
find the lot. It
is
already knows.
this is available in the US?
It's a soft release here, right? It'll design the product for you all the way to CAD drawings. But I guess the great thing about it is it'll give you like 1,000 designs, just so you can choose and say, here's all the options. And get this, it also knows the code because they went around and they pulled all the codes for all the areas. And then I'll take it one step further. It'll tell you what your cut and fill is.
Dude.
I mean, this stuff's getting out of control, crazy
This
on
is
how it
this is ho
works.
this is how I feel, is that it's getting out of control. And, we talk about, let's just think about, like, the last 5 years. Let's ignore AI for a second.
Yeah,
The last 5 years, like, tool technology and, like, just how we when just specific to tools, right? We went from corded to cordless, and everyone, like, lost their mind over it, and now it's like,
right,
now you can't even buy a compressor, without batteries on it. It's like everything's
right.
battery operated, and it's we're making these strides, but then you introduce AI, and it's like we're not even taking these like short strides. These are massive leaps that
Yep,
people are gonna have a really hard time keeping up with. And I think this will be the, like, let's call it the great divide of people that, are refusing to adapt. Oh, the code's getting too stringent. I'm just going to build
yeah,
the way I build. I'm just going to use, I've always built this way. Houses are too tight. All of these stupid arguments. It's like, well, you're choosing to kind of, be status quo. You're not going to be like, your product won't even survive. Like,
right,
never mind pass code.
yeah,
And and with technology, it's like this stuff's going to come in fast and furious, and it's like, everyone's like, I can't believe we're going to have to build to a passive home level, by whatever date that is. It's like, well, I
yeah,
can. It's,
yeah, yeah,
and I think about Bensonwood, like, who, we're chatting with them on a project, and I think their product is great. I love the way they put the panels together, and they can put that up, and I'm not going to say guarantee, but there's a really good chance that that's going to test at a passive house level airtightness,
yeah,
as
for
it
sure.
should.
I was on a site with Jay Lepley, who works with
Jay's
Benson.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, he's amazing, and we did a live stream of them setting their house and their panel, and we spent a couple days with them doing that. And they've been doing this for years. They've
Yeah.
already figured this out. It's just starting to gain popularity. But to address what you said, yeah, if you're not staying up with this stuff, you're going to get run over. It's that simple. There's that much happening that fast right now. And again, unless somebody has a magic wand to bring the trades back and bring more labor back and drop the average age of plumbers and electricity from electricians from the 50s back down to the 20s and 30s, guess what? House building is going to stay unaffordable, and people are going to find an alternative means of building
Yeah.
because that's what the market's going to drive, and that's kind of what's happening. So it's
And,
super exciting.
and I mean, just to what you just said, like, that's why there's been this uptick in multifamily, in combined housing. And it's
Yeah,
like micro apartment, like, the more densely populated dwellings. Like,
yeah,
that's because of affordability. We
yeah.
Dave, we've talked a lot about, like, panelize and envelope from structures and things like that, but what about mechanicals, plumbing, electrical, what have you seen in that space, or in any of these trades, masons,
Yeah.
the guys that you fight with all the time? Like, what are you seeing in some of these other specialty trades that is super interesting?
So we mentioned wiring harness, right? So, and I'm okay throwing names out, right, for your
Yeah,
listeners. So
sure.
look at Apex wiring. It is exactly what you said. You can now take your plans, you'll be able to send it to Apex, and they will give you a complete wiring harness built for your entire house, labeled, numbered, and exactly where it goes in your house. So when you go to wire, everything is there like a wiring harness for a car. That's a big deal. We're also seeing a lot of low voltage wiring, right? Why do we need? I mean, everything's LED. You don't need to run 110 in the house like
I
that
know.
anymore, right? So we're seeing a lot of conversions where now, get this, like you can bury low voltage in the seam of your spackle and have a plug at the bottom of it, and nobody will ever get electrocuted.
Yeah.
Plug in your stuff, you get charged. So that's what we're seeing on the wiring side is quite a bit of the wiring harnesses coming out. When it comes to the plumbing side, not much has changed on the plumbing side other than like what you said earlier. Now we're looking at systems. Harris Mechanical is the largest plumbing contractor in the United States, and they are building using offsite fabrication. So think of a 30, 40-story building. They're using a big crane to drop in their stacks, their sand stacks and everything from the top. But as they're building the building up, they actually already have them made horizontally as well, and they just click it in.
Yeah.
Click it in each floor, and you still got finish, but it speeds up that time and process. We're seeing that in the residential space as well with panelization and modular. You'll see where there's systems to where you drop that wall or you slide a wall to a wall. It'll have, shark bite be the closest thing people could think of, right?
Yeah. Right.
A fitting that it would be so precise and connect to. So we are seeing that. And I guess we're in regards to mechanicals, mechanicals are getting so efficient now, right? When we get into mini splits, those, ductless, heating and cooling, those are the things we're seeing. We're seeing heating and cooling units now that are indoor without having to have a condenser outside any longer, similar to what we see in Europe. The problem is they don't have enough BTU yet to do the big houses. So you have to have several of them. But mini splits, a company called Unico is somebody you guys want to look at. They do a high efficiency duct system. They're really big in the offsite space,
Yeah.
and doing great things. Cobalt Creed is the name of their systems that they use for modular. It's a division of Unico. But I think we're gonna as we build tighter houses, Nick, we are not going to need these big beast 3-ton, 6-ton units and all this stuff happening anymore.
Right.
It'll get to a point where we need very little energy to heat and cool the house. And as much as people hate the code and where it's going, that's one of the benefits that's coming out of it.
Yeah.
But it's going to be a while before we see the affordability side of it happen.
Right. But I think this is where that we have to realize that we need to spend money appropriately. Where like the affordability can come if we're building smaller homes. The only reason we're building bigger homes, one of the reasons we're building bigger homes, is because people are taking advantage of opportunities, i.e., with a builder that isn't making a profit and using less than quality products to get it done. And it's like, well, now you're creating this field of product that you're trying to compare to, and it's not fair. And it's, like the whole real estate comps. It's, we're going to be building I use spec very loosely, but like a home for sale under the NS brand here starting in June. We're actually in design now, and everyone's talking about comps. And it's like, we don't have comps for this. Like, yeah, but you can't sell it without a comp. I'm like, well, fair enough. Like I get the status quo. Like hopefully I can break that mold and realize like the product that we're putting out is superior, and I'll give you the reasons as to why, and we'll market to the reasons why. Thinking about, offsite construction, thinking about the opportunity that we can take to not only be profitable as a company, but end up with a better product for our end user. And and that needs to be the focus where it'll be so hard to implement some of these things until the consumer understands it.
Yeah, it will be, and I think a pretty simple change, even for the stick builder, right? Or the site builder or the framer, there's now packages, framing packages.
Yeah.
But the framing packages, the machines now are cutting them so so precise, and they're labeling them.
Yeah.
But that's only half the battle. So it's not just labeling. Now imagine this is the beauty of it. Now they're actually putting it on the truck in the order that you'll take it off, stack it, and then use it. So you don't have to try and move 1,000 things around to get it right. And where's the value in that? And again, I talk about turning a crown and carpenters looking at a crown, but how many times can any framer cut a 2x4 or a 2x6 or a 2x10 the same way 1,000 times on a project on a job site at the same precise accuracy. It'll never happen.
Right.
They get close, they're good, give it, unless they're all master carpenters, like trim carpenters, and really, fine tune their detail. But most framers are not. That's where this value is going to come in. And I think, for you looking at Panelize, I commend you,
Yeah.
and I think it's going to take you a few times to really dial in your own mind, even if you use the Benson wood product, it takes a little bit to figure it out. It's not an overnight success.
No. And kind of final thought on like the whole offsite is, we, especially after Switzerland, seeing the CLT, I came back on like a CLT high. I was like, why aren't we doing this? And, a friend of mine owns a structural company, and they're doing a mid-rise in town, all CLT. And I was chatting with him. I'm like, who else is building this? And he's like, oh, just this one GC. I'm like, I want to be the next guy. He's like, you do mid-rise? I'm like, I will. I'm like, because I think CLT, like, there's just enormous capabilities with it. And it's also beautiful. Like, I think it's so good looking.
I know, but they cover it up over there.
I know. Which I was
it's a whole nother conversation.
I know. Like some of the floor systems, I was like, okay, it went from simple in my mind to like, you have so many things being stacked in this floor system where now I can be like, yeah, but concrete on metal deck kind of makes more sense than that. But so we've started exploring CLT. And one of the offsite remote island jobs is definitely going to be CLT. And we're exploring it for another small, like 2,500 square foot gable, simple, modern barn-ish, whatever you want to call it, project that we're going to be building, hopefully starting in the summer, fall. And we're considering CLT on it. And it's the same. And we actually toured a project that Opal did. I toured one of Opal's, and it's beautiful. You go in, it's different, right? Like and they left everything exposed on the inside, but it's really beautiful. And
it is beautiful.
and so we started pricing it, and it's like, yeah, it's just not in the residential market. It's 30% more expensive than a traditional envelope. I'm like, what do we got to do? Like, how do we like, we gotta work towards making this more affordable. There's so many benefits to it. Being able to, there would be an entire market of people that if I said, hey, you don't need to have gypsum or drywall, it's like, or plaster or blue board, it's like people would be all for that. It's like they don't know that there's another option.
Yeah, I agree. And well, gypsum's a whole nother thing. I think whoever solves that problem is going to be the big winner in this industry. That's, gypsum and drywall is a whole nother, I think, archaic thing. But coming back to CLT, Mercer Mass Timber just took over the largest CLT plant in the country. Todd Bayreuther, that's whose panel system I did a demonstration with at the International Builder Show. Well, most people don't know they are also the largest producer of wood materials, taking raw wood and making material out of it. They're a huge company out of Canada, but they have operations in Germany and elsewhere around the world. And they just bought that manufacturing plant and are already looking at several others. So to answer your question, there just has to be more volume of it happening. And they're doing it differently than, well, they're still doing the panels like you saw in Switzerland, but they're also doing framing packages now where they're cutting the studs to zero tolerance. I mean, it is perfectly square. You look at Autovol, they don't use 2x4. They use true, 2x4 and 3x4s for their framing, because you can't put crap lumber through a machine, a robotic machine. It can't figure it out. Right. So I think you're going to see it. And I think it's going to become more affordable as it becomes more prevalent. I think as the codes change, for especially commercial buildings, right? This is what's going to make it more prevalent, because it reduces the carbon footprint by so much by using mass timber. And it doesn't burn like people thinks it's burned. Burning mass timber is like trying to start a fire with a, 6-inch or 12-inch round log. Go ahead, sit there with your match all day long.
Right.
It chars before it burns through. In fact, there's even some studies, that like trade centers, for example, metal can melt too when it gets too hot. Right.
Sure.
And that's kind of what we're seeing. But We traveled, I think we told you, like, for 2 years traveling the country, and you probably I'm gonna invite you over, I hope you can come. We got booked for a month and a half in Europe, July and August, whole family, our video crew, everybody, to do exactly what we did again in Switzerland, Austria, Germany, what did I and Italy, Switzerland, Germany, and,
Did you just invite me on a multi-month vacation?
I did. Come on, man.
Can I
Come
bring
on.
all four of my children?
They're letting us bring our kids. It's
All right.
amazing. Why not? We just have to bunk. But we're going to showcase all of this stuff. And I did want to answer. You asked me earlier why I'm, because I don't want people saying, well, how come he's not still building modular if it's so
Sure.
great, right? Because that's what comes out of these things. And for us, like a lot of people, I had a partnership, and my mind was somewhere else. I knew we could build better. I knew
Mhm.
we could do better, right? And before we got to that point, though, where we decided to part our ways, and I go this route, we had a social media marketing person say, Dave, you have to do video for your company, right? I was the Bob Vila of modular home for years and years and years.
Mhm.
And so I would go on the job site and just do live videos on Facebook when it was happening. And it's a kind of a funny story, because she said, Dave, she goes, you got to do it. And I said, because I can hire somebody to do that, no big deal. But I ended up finding out that I really liked it, and I liked the conversation. And then we started getting invited to the bigger tables, to have these conversations at events and things like that. And I realized that, there is a better way to do this. It makes no sense the way we've been doing it. For 20 years, I was selling panel and modular because it's a better way to build.
Mhm.
Not all factories are created equal. Some don't put the quality in that others do.
Right.
But once you understand the value of a system and how you can use that to your benefit and how you can grow your business, that's what we started doing. So similar to you, my guess is your podcast helps, right? Your
Mhm.
customers see you doing this podcast, you're having these real conversations, you're putting it out there. People started building a trust with us, and they would walk into the design center and be, hey, you're that guy on YouTube. My wife watched all your videos. She loves the White House with the white subway tile, backsplash, dot, 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 dot. And all of a sudden they're giving you a check.
Yeah.
That's the value of video and what we were doing. And that's when we kind of learned what was happening. And we went all in right before COVID. Obviously, we sold out of our partnership because we wanted to move back to Pittsburgh because my family's here and my kids don't know my family, so it was in the works anyhow. And my wife said to me, she said, let's just buy a motorhome, sell our house, and travel. And we did, with all of our kids. They were 12 at the time, twin daughters at 12, and a 4-year-old son, in a motorhome traveling the country. And then we picked up sponsors, and we just kept going to all these awesome places to showcase people that were building it better. And
And
that's how
that
we got into this.
and then 2 years later, here you are, and you're an advocate for all things, when it comes to panel modularization,
That's
technology,
right.
innovation.
Yeah.
I think that was, on our bus rides and time in Switzerland, like, you were just a wealth of knowledge, and like you rattling off these companies and these software companies. It's like, whether you have a list in front of you or not, it's like, to be able to memorize the amount of people that you've talked to and toured, you can tell that it's more than just, research. It's something you believe in. And I in the beginning or earlier, I was going to ask you, like, if people like, how do people get this information? You're talking about how fast innovation is coming, how much technology is coming.
Yeah.
Like, the guys are just going to be burnt out trying to keep up with all this stuff. But I'll say it for you. I mean, your channel's there, and this is what your
Yeah.
channel's there for.
Yeah. So, to clarify, our channel in 2 years, I think we're at 800 interviews around the world. And we only interview C-suite executive level people, the people that have the ability, the money, and the resources, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's a new product, it could be even a startup, right? For that
Mhm.
matter, what's happening in the industry. And that's what we do to keep showcasing what's happening and where the change happening. So, yeah, I appreciate that. Our YouTube channel, DaveCooper.live, or it's Dave Cooper Live on YouTube, is a great resource to go through. But for anybody out there that's doing video, and I say this to everybody, if you're a small business, custom builder like yourself and NS Builders, video is such a powerful tool, and it's going to take everybody to make that change. And I think, using video to your advantage, so your customers or potential clients can build build a reputation with you, is the most remarkable thing that you will do if you can just stick with it for 6 months to a year and be steady with what you do. But showcasing what's happening in the world as it changes has been an amazing journey for us, and one we didn't expect to go to. And two, so people know it's not about likes. I used to get hung up on subscribers. We were on Trip, right? Some of these guys have millions of subscribers, and I'm like, oh, I only have 5,000 subscribers. But we're very niche, right? Your clients don't care about 1 million subscribers. They care about, who are you? What do you build? Do I like them? Can I trust them?
That's a great point.
And right.
Yeah.
They don't care about that. And we're a destination. They only want you when they want you.
Yeah.
If they, after they're done, they're done. But even in this world, if you're going to do this and you're out there and you really want to grow what you do, I think I have like 5,000 subscribers, but I think I'm pushing like 35,000 out, 35 hour. It's a huge number of watch time.
Yeah.
Guess what, Nick? CEOs and executives don't want other people to know that they're watching. And most of them don't have a YouTube channel to actually subscribe. But my biggest watch time, take a guess.
I have no idea.
Saturday morning between 5:30 and 8 a.m. on Saturday and Sunday.
That's the C-suite guys.
Because they're all up just drinking their coffee and listening to what they missed that week.
No one else is waking up at 5:30 in the morning on a Saturday except for those guys.
But it took me a long time to realize that it's people that watch your stuff over time, and that's how you build relationships and what you do. So
I love that.
I love it.
Dave, one last question. We didn't get to it, but what's up with Boxable? I know you interviewed them, dude.
You had to ask, huh?
Good, bad?
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah, I think that I think it's so interesting, and just real quick, like my view on it is they've just been like dangling this thing, at the builder show, and it's like every year they're there, and like the product gets a little bit better, but I'm like, I feel like they're on the brink of just like completely exploding in a very positive way. Am I close?
Yeah, so I can't say much. I know Paolo and Galliano, the two owners, really well, but I will tell you, stay on the lookout because I will be the first one to live stream a Big Brother sleeping at their factory in a Boxable outside with the founders and the owners, and we might have a cameo from somebody that gets a lot of talk about owning one. Does he or does he not? So we do have that coming up, because one of the things we also do is we hold a lot of private CEO executive roundtable events, and Boxable is one of the places we're going. But to answer your question, they are exploding. They have thousands of orders already, pre-orders in place. The factory's up and running. They're dialing it in. Obviously, it takes a while to get the machines and the process moving. They've already expanded a couple 100,000 more square feet, and they're looking at other expansions already. So
amazing.
It's really is an amazing product. It's still new, and they still got some kinks to work out. They went from the casita, right, the little square one, but at the show they had the 2-story, which is 3 of the casitas really built together. And I have to tell you, it was like the inside when you go upstairs, like the master bedroom was beautiful.
It's impressive. It's super impressive. Yeah.
Were you at the show?
Unfortunately, I'm not. We're expecting our child any day now, so
that's awesome.
I chose to stay back. Smart.
Congratulations.
Smart decision. Thank you. But I've seen it before, and I'm excited to get back there next year. But next time you talk to Paulo, you have to introduce this podcast, because I'd love to chat with him. I'm sure he's inundated with meetings and interviews, but it would be cool to chat with him at some point.
If you want to do an interview with Paulo, I can make that happen too.
Fantastic.
No problem.
Cool.
No problem. That's the value of what we do. That's the other value of knowing all these people. It's amazing, and keep it real, man. Nick, I love what you do, dude. I love following you doing what you do, and
appreciate that, man.
Someday I hope to be you and I get Mike Rowe on my show. That would be cool.
Hey, that was a fluke. That was like that came out of left field, and I'm scrambling in the hotel lobby at Switzerland to get Wi-Fi, and I was like, I can't believe Mike Rowe's about to log in here. So I've been hounding him to get on the podcast for close to a year at this point, or more than a year, but someday soon. But Dave, this was an amazing conversation. I know you got to go, but I would love to schedule another time to keep this conversation rolling. And then, of course, when Tyler is available to be back on the podcast, he's in actually at the festival headquarters this week, checking them out. So
that's really cool.
Yeah. So I appreciate your time. Appreciate everything you do for the industry. I appreciate the knowledge you've shared with us today. And maybe I'll see you in Europe this summer.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it. Come on, man.
All right. I'll
Thanks,
talk to
Nick.
you. Cheers, man.
All right. See you. Bye now.
See ya. just real quick as we wrap up this podcast, wanted to thank you guys for being such great listeners through years and years of the podcast. You guys have, if you haven't seen it, we've rebranded the podcast entirely on Instagram. The new handle is at Modern Craftsman Pod, POD. Slash has done an amazing job with rebranding. Our website's going to be live any day now. We're super excited about it. We have a ton of merch for you guys. And just really just wanted to get on here and thank you for the continued support. And if you'd like to continue to support us beyond just listening, would love if you could hop onto iTunes, leave us a review, let us know how we're doing, like and share this, and make sure you're promoting it on Instagram so we can like and share that back. Again, just huge thank you for being such a huge support to us.
I'm cracking up because you guys are such good listeners. I feel like that's something I would say to my kids, or I wish I could say to
I
my
was gonna
kids.
say, I wish I could say
I don't
that
think
to
I've
my
ever
kids.
said that to my kids, maybe in my dreams. But I also want to thank everyone, partners, sponsors, our guests, our listeners. It's been a long road, a long journey. We've recently put some people in place. You know, Doug's working his butt off, Catherine, Ariana, and I feel as though we're hitting our stride. And we have a lot going on, but I'm very excited for the future. Everyone has been so supportive of the changes within the podcast, of the new branding. I can't get over how much I love it and how many people are reaching out to me saying how much they love it. So, as always, if you have 2 seconds, the biggest thing for us, if you can leave a review for us, it keeps us kind of relevant within that podcast search. It helps us, it helps our partners, and it allows us to be able to do what we do on a weekly basis. So if you're looking for ways to thank us, or Nick's birthday's coming up, you want to get him a birthday present, leave a review, right?
Happy birthday to me.
All right, guys, thank you.